Imagine waking up on a completely normal Monday morning. You sit down at your desk, open your laptop, and start checking your emails, just like you always do. Then you notice an email that immediately makes you nervous. The subject says, "Important meeting, 9 a.m." You don't know it yet, but this meeting could completely change your life. You walk into the meeting room and see your manager sitting across the table. Something feels different. Your manager looks serious, uncomfortable, and unusually quiet. Then comes the sentence nobody wants to hear. Unfortunately, your position has been eliminated. In just a few seconds, years of work can suddenly disappear. You're shocked. You start wondering what went wrong. Was the company losing money? Was business slowing down? Did the company suddenly run out of cash? But then you check the news, and that's when things become confusing. Your company just announced record profits. Revenue is rising, profits are rising, and investors are celebrating. So here's the obvious question. If the company is making more money than ever, why are employees getting fired? To understand the answer, we need to look at how businesses actually make decisions. Many people assume that if a company is profitable, employees automatically have job security. But that's not how modern businesses work. Profitability is only one part of the equation. Companies don't just ask, how much money are we making? They also ask, how much does it cost us to make that money? And that second question can completely change the picture. Imagine a company generating $10 billion in revenue every year. $10 billion sounds enormous. You might assume the company has more than enough money to keep everyone employed. But revenue isn't the same as profit. If that company spends $9.5 billion on operations, equipment, marketing, technology, suppliers, and employees, only about $500 million remains as profit. Now, imagine executives discover a way to cut $200 million from their annual expenses. They don't need to sell more products. They don't even need to find new customers. Revenue stays the same, but profit could increase from $500 million to $700 million. That's a 40% increase in profit simply by reducing costs. This is why businesses care so much about profit margins. Making money is important, but making money efficiently can be even more important to investors and executives. And for many companies, one of the biggest expenses is labor. The larger the workforce becomes, the more expensive it is to maintain that workforce every single year. An employee doesn't cost a company only their salary. The company may also pay for healthcare, retirement contributions, equipment, office space, software, training, and other benefits. All of those expenses add up. From the company's perspective, every employee represents an ongoing financial commitment, not just a number on a monthly paycheck. For example, imagine an employee earns $70,000 per year. The actual cost to the company can be significantly higher once benefits, insurance, equipment, and other expenses are included. Now multiply that cost by 100,000 employees. Suddenly, even a small percentage of workforce reduction can represent hundreds of millions of dollars in annual savings. That's why layoffs can look attractive from a purely financial perspective. Reducing the workforce can immediately lower expenses, sometimes without reducing revenue at the same rate. But this still leaves us with the biggest question. Why would a profitable company choose layoffs instead of simply keeping its employees? Sometimes the answer is simple. The company isn't laying people off because it's losing money. It's laying people off because management believes the business can operate with fewer employees. Imagine a company with 10,000 employees. 10,000 people may have been necessary when the company was growing rapidly, but that doesn't necessarily mean the same number is necessary today. During periods of rapid growth, companies often hire aggressively. Managers don't want to miss opportunities, so they add employees before they actually know how large the future demand will become. New departments appear. New teams are created. More managers are hired. Before long, an organization that started relatively small can become extremely complicated and expensive. Then, reality changes. A major project gets canceled. A product doesn't perform as expected. A new market doesn't grow. But the employees hired for those plans are still on the payroll. Eventually, executives look at the organization and ask a painful question. Do we really need all these people? If the answer is no, layoffs can happen even while profits remain strong. And that's an important distinction. A company doesn't always cut jobs because something is going terribly wrong. Sometimes it cuts jobs because management believes the company has become larger than it needs to be. The pandemic gave us one of the clearest examples of this phenomenon. In a very short period of time, the way people worked, shopped, and entertained themselves changed dramatically. Millions of people began working from home. Online shopping exploded. Video calls became normal. Digital services suddenly became more important than ever. Companies connected to online shopping and digital services saw demand rise rapidly. Orders increased, users increased, and revenues grew at an extraordinary pace. Technology companies saw this opportunity and started expanding aggressively. They needed more engineers, salespeople, customer support workers, managers, and other employees. But many executives made an important assumption. They believed the extraordinary growth would continue. So companies started hiring for the future before that future had actually arrived. Hiring accelerated. Companies competed for talented workers and offered attractive salaries and benefits. Thousands of people were brought into companies that were expecting years of continued growth. Technology offices became larger and more crowded. New teams appeared everywhere, and companies invested heavily in building organizations capable of handling enormous future demand. Then the world changed again. As the pandemic faded, consumer behavior started returning toward normal. The extraordinary demand that companies had planned for began to disappear. People returned to offices. Shoppers returned to physical stores. Some online services were used less frequently. Suddenly, companies didn't need as many employees as they had expected. And executives faced a difficult realization. They had hired too many people compared with actual demand. The problem wasn't necessarily that the company was unprofitable. The problem was that the workforce had become too large. That was when large-scale layoffs began. Thousands of employees could lose their jobs because a prediction made years earlier had turned out to be wrong. And here's the part that surprises many people. Some of these companies were still making billions of dollars. They weren't necessarily collapsing. They simply wanted to operate with a smaller and more efficient workforce. But employees aren't the only people influencing these decisions. There's another powerful group inside public companies: investors. A public company has responsibilities to its customers, employees, and shareholders. And shareholders want to know whether their investment is becoming more valuable over time. Imagine Company A made $1 billion in profit last year and another $1 billion this year. That's still a huge amount of money, but its profit hasn't grown. Now imagine Company B made $700 million last year and $1 billion this year. Company B made the same $1 billion this year, but its growth looks much more impressive. Company B's profit increased by roughly 43%. For investors, that growth can be much more exciting than simply maintaining the same profit year after year. This is why investors don't only ask, is the company profitable? They also want to know whether the company is becoming more profitable. They ask a much more important question. Can this company make even more money in the future? And that question can put enormous pressure on executives. If reducing labor costs can increase profits, management may see layoffs as one way to improve financial performance. From an employee's perspective, it feels personal. From a spreadsheet's perspective, it looks like cost reduction. But there's another force changing the equation: technology. And this may become even more important in the years ahead. Automation, software, and artificial intelligence are allowing companies to perform more tasks with fewer people. A job that once required several employees may eventually require only a smaller team supervising technology. Imagine a business process that once required 20 employees to operate every day. 20 people are answering questions, entering information, checking documents, and moving data between systems. Now imagine new software and automation can handle most of those repetitive tasks. Suddenly, the company may only need 10 employees to supervise the entire process. For the employees who disappear, this can feel frightening. But from the company's perspective, the change is described differently: higher productivity, lower costs, and greater efficiency. If the new technology saves a company $1.2 million every year, management may consider the investment extremely valuable. Technology doesn't have to replace everyone to have a major financial impact. But layoffs have a hidden cost that isn't always visible on a financial spreadsheet. When employees leave, companies can lose experience, knowledge, and relationships that took years to build. An experienced employee may understand customers' internal systems and unusual problems better than anyone else. That knowledge can be incredibly valuable, even if it doesn't appear as a line on a balance sheet. And if too many employees are removed, the workers who remain may become overwhelmed. Their workload increases, stress rises, and productivity can eventually suffer. So layoffs can create a strange trade-off. They may improve profits in the short term, while creating serious operational problems in the long term. That's why you shouldn't look at only one number when judging a company's health. Look at revenue growth, profit margins, hiring trends, technology, industry conditions, and management's expectations for the future. A company can make billions and still lay off thousands of workers. Because in business, the question isn't just, are we making money? It's, can we make even more with fewer people?